And gentlemen, my name is DJ Eshelman, and I write books. All right. Some books even get published, but the one we're going to look at tonight did not get published, cannot get published, will never be published, because tonight's book is a Star Wars book. Happy May the 4th, everyone. Good to be back with you. Hopefully some of you caught my earlier restream of chapters 1 through 3 of this book, but if not, let me take a few moments and let you know the kind of the backstory of this book before we start getting into this and the story. So back in about 1997, some friends and I were playing a Star Wars role-playing game, and I came up with a character and a story arc that I really enjoyed. And this character, as we did in the game, was instrumental in rescuing and then participating in the creation of what would become the A-Wing starfighter. Wish I had one here. I could show you a picture or something like that, but I'm not that advanced today. We didn't prepare like that. So the story goes, this takes place right about the time that the episode 4 would have started. Now, I will say that because this story arc and the way it was outlined initially was done in 1997, none of the other things with the Clone Wars or Rogue One or anything like that ever happened. So the things you're going to hear today will probably make you scratch your head if you weren't some of the OG people that were the original viewers of Star Wars. So yeah, so I'll leave it at that. So what we saw in chapters 1 through 3 is our main character, Gorono Haltana, was involved in the rescue of Walix Blissix, who is an engineer and who we learn was instrumental in the development of the Star Destroyers, the Imperial class Star Destroyer, and had been recruited by the Alliance to work on the A-Wing project, a fast reconnaissance fighter that would be the fastest starfighter in the galaxy. And yeah, we're going to get into more mechanics of that later, but they recruit Gorono as a hotshot pilot to not only consult on the design, but also function as test pilot. But while they're doing this, the Empire launches the Death Star and destroys Alderaan. And so we are picking up the story. I just jumped ahead. I'm sorry. We are picking up the story just off of the Death Star. There's a scene where Vader is choking Admiral Mahdi, and is so that's the scene we just read. So hopefully you can go back and view the other story, but if not, you might be a little confused, but I'm sure you'll pick it up. But I'll try and remember to put the link in the description or whatever here to get you back to the other one if you want to catch up, if you're just seeing this and haven't viewed that. But without any ado, let us get started with chapter 4 of Avenger Alliance, Gorono's Revenge, which, by the way, a title that I chose while I was writing the book as well, the concept. I will say that I might change the title of this at some point if I decide to go any further with this, just because I don't know if it really fits where the story goes, but that's okay. That's what the story's called for now, Gorono's Revenge. So this is chapter 4. Let's get into this. What the hell are you doing in my X-Wing? Gorono shouted. The kid didn't know what to do. I was just looking. I've never actually seen one before. I'm sorry, sir. Gorono took a deep breath. No need to get upset. Hell, the thing was still in pieces from the Mon Cal overway. Anyway, just please don't be nosing around in other people's cockpits. Pilots get really nervous about that sort of stuff. If you don't mind me asking, sir, the greenie said as he jumped down off the nose of the X-Wing, how long have you been here? On this base, I mean. Well, I can't discuss that, but long enough, kid. Long enough. It was an ironic question, first of all. The entire base had been here in the Masasi Temple only about a year, and Gorono actually could discuss that he'd been here before on and off, and have been here for the past week, but Gorono was growing touchy. The panic evacuation of Dantooine, all these new pilots popping up, especially ones like Wingsinger that are always full of questions. You never know who you could really trust, especially now with Gorono's new assignment. It was probably best not to say. My name is Dak. Dak Ralter, sir. Why did everyone want to introduce themselves so much lately? Didn't they know how they'd be dead soon enough anyway? Lieutenant Gorono Haltana. You're Lieutenant Haltana? The kid looked shocked. Yes. Why? Gorono was kind of getting tired of this. Someone in recruiting had heard the tales of his last 5 missions and branded him a hero, but Gorono was no damn war hero, and he certainly was no role model. I've been told to watch you to learn how to fly good. I hope his flying is better than his grammar, Gorono chuckled. Here was this kid who couldn't be taller than his sister, with a squirmy voice and a bad haircut, asking him for free pointers. Well, keep your blasters charged and don't get dead. The boy looked confused. He had heard a few stories and wasn't prepared for the real Gorono Haltana. Who was this guy anyway? Gorono walked on, and Dak went the other direction, eyeballing a long-range Y-wing being fitted with anti-capital ship rockets. Lieutenant Haltana, please report to Ops. Lieutenant Haltana to Ops, the intercom said with its usual bland voice. Gorono sighed. He wanted to be back in the cockpit, back in space where you could kill anything that was bothering you, like those pesky TIE fighters, like Corellian mob flies. They were always trying to crash the party. Of course, the TIEs were a little more lethal, but annoying nonetheless. Gorono stepped into Ops, and a soundproof door closed behind him. What the hell is going on? He had asked himself. General Dodonna addressed him, but didn't look up from the tactical display. Captain, or Lieutenant Haltana, welcome to Base 1 Ops Center. We have a situation. The Tantive 4 has been taken. The ship that was carrying Senator Organa? Gorono asked. The same. It was in orbit of Tatooine when we lost contact with them. The data files? That's just it, Dodonna was saying. We don't know. We got a message that all aboard were killed in a freak accident. But one of our sources on Tatooine saw the ship being attacked, but saw no explosions big enough to be our ship. She speculates that the Tantive 4 was likely taken or boarded. It's a pretty standard blockade runner, so it could fit within a tractor bay of a Star Destroyer. She did notice, however, a great number of stormtroopers in search parties on the planet. Gorono frowned. Most likely they took Leia and Captain Antilles and whatever crew seemed important enough for interrogation, but the files weren't on board. They must have assumed somehow that the senator was able to get the tapes down to the surface. Dodonna continued. Furthermore, a YT-1300 with questionable transponder codes left in a big hurry from Mos Eisley. Barely escaped the barricade. We're talking a lot of Imperial attention all of a sudden. More than 3 Star Destroyers. Intel thinks that the plans were aboard that ship, along with, he paused, Obi-Wan Kenobi. He was seen in the cantina at Mos Eisley about an hour beforehand with some kid, and they've both vanished. Gorono adjusted his frown slightly. Great. More Jedi. He had assumed Kenobi was dead, along with Gorono's childhood idol, one of the greatest pilots in history, Anakin Skywalker. But few people seemed to concern themselves with the Clone War history. Perhaps it had not yet been long enough, and some wounds still remained. General Dodonna continued. I'm putting all available forces on yellow alert. The Empire may indeed find us, and that battle station is surely vulnerable somehow if they are putting so much into regaining those plans. Gorono had put the Death Star out of his mind on the first debriefing after hearing about the supposed size of it. If it was not dealt with, the galaxy was in deep trouble. I want you, Dodonna was saying, to put together a 5-man wing. Get with Admiral Akbar about who should be on it. You'll be using X-Wings. And, he smiled, no sensor jammers this time. Gorono smiled back. Thank you, sir. Oh, here's Admiral Akbar now. Admiral? The Mon Calamari Admiral had a history well known to Gorono, and Akbar was one of the few that knew most of Gorono's history as well. Lieutenant Haltana, good to see you again. How's my nephew doing on your X-Wing? Gorono replied, Oh, good last that I checked. Good kid. So that's why the Mon Cal was sent to work on my ship. Your ship is in good hands, Lieutenant, Akbar said. The Admiral tells me that his brother-in-law, Jabbi Doniper, designed the shields on the MC-80 cruisers, Donna said over his shoulder. Really? I was unaware of that, Gorono replied. He had already learned much today, and to know that there was a family lineage like that working on his ship was comforting. The MC-80s had the best shields he knew of. His X-Wing was indeed in good hands. He hoped. Calamari family units were large. Admiral Akbar paused, remembering his dead sister-in-law. With a sad-sounding slurp of fresh air, Akbar continued. So let's discuss your team, Lieutenant. I just wish I knew who to pick. Butch, certainly. Collins, perhaps. Wingsinger is a little green, but shows promise. I don't know who this Dak Ralter kid is. Gorono frowned, deep in thought, going through a mental roster of pilots he'd seen around that weren't on assignment with other wings at the moment. Guardian Burns might want it, if his other half will let him. Do you have a roster anywhere? What about the Renegade boys? I'm sorry, no. Renegade is leading a strike on Imperial Supply Depot at the moment, Akbar replied with a slurp. But here is a list of pilots currently on the planet, he said, motioning to a table where the datapad was sitting. After about 3 minutes, Gorono said, You have to be kidding. Most of these people have never flown Z-95s. How are we going to expect them to handle an X-Wing? Gorono was looking mostly for time of combat service and, frankly, tie kills. How about this Wedge Antilles? Gorono said. Red Later already has nabbed him, sorry. So the old man had gotten a jump on him once again. How about this Biggs guy? Boss got him too, fresh out of flight school. Gorono wondered what the point of handpicking a wing was if there were none to choose from. Why hadn't he given just a list of available pilots? General, Admiral, I think you better hear this, a passing lieutenant was saying. 4 monitors in the operations center all tuned suddenly to a newscast that was in progress. Again, if you're just joining us, the Empire has a... Sorry. Again, if you're just joining us, the Emperor has officially dissolved the Senate. Gorono turned away. It was almost if he knew it was how it would happen. Yet everyone else in the room seemed shocked. But if everyone knew what would happen next, the Empire would just become a police state. The military would now have control over vast star systems. What was once meant to protect the old republic had now become the very end of it. This meant that more people would die. It meant more people like his sister and mother would be shot down in cold blood if they spoke against the government anyway. Gorono looked down when he realized that nearly everyone in the room was staring at him, including Akbar and Dodonna. The only sound in the room was the continuing news brief, but blood was dripping from his hand onto the floor. The small data pad he had been carrying was now crushed into shards that had cut into his hand. Life was about to get complicated. The sun was shining. It was a pleasant day overall, but there were no smiling faces here, only faces gripped in terror and worry, as news of a giant space station, the size and shape of a small moon, had been spotted nearly in orbit. Mouths were moving, people shouting, but there was no sound. People were scrambling towards whatever starcraft they could find, hiding wherever possible. Doom was in the air, a silent, inevitable doom. Such one face was that of Tejano Haltana, obviously ordering the planetary defense systems to be activated, systems that had not been used in far too long to be manned, much less able to respond. No, Alderaan is peaceful. We have no weapons. The voice was distant. It sounded like Princess Leia, yet it was worried, tense. Dantooine. They're on Dantooine. Children were playing in a field, tall with Yava flowers in the field surrounding the Gorono Memorial. It was late spring. Though still no sound could be heard, the gentle breeze was warm and sweet in the Huron Valley. You may fire when ready. That voice was familiar. Tarkin. The killer of children. Murderer of the innocent. Silencer of voices. It was as if the world was then almost still. A bright green flash, as if the sun itself had suddenly turned a different hue and flung itself onto the surface. Those in the capital who happened to be looking up, screamed in horror, and that sound suddenly filled space as if nothing else had ever been there. Horrible, hopeless, pure, fear, shrieking, terrible, and coming from everywhere. Faces twisted in wide-eyed terror, teeth bared, and mouths wide. All but one. The face of Bail Organa simply stopped his HoloNet conversation and stared upward, expressionless. But only for a moment. The planet itself broke apart as the core accelerated suddenly into hyperspace. A bright flash as the accretion disk split the planet suddenly into two, as the remaining magma core heated to 15 times the temperature of the sun. To the west and the east, there was no time to be afraid. No time to know what was happening. Just a sudden feeling of being thrown into the air, hot and then suddenly cold. A brief scream of terror, sudden, searing pain. Then nothing. The bodies fused to rock, floated in space. Cold. Spinning. Again quiet. A reflection of the sun sends a small sparkle into the void. The sun, oblivious to the targets of its rays, reflects off the golden ring fused to the rock. The shimmering shape on the ring, somehow distinguishable. The crest of House Haltana. You let one of them live that you could have destroyed? Blissix seemed surprised. Blissix surprised Gorono with his tone, suddenly very upset. That means word of this sensor jammer will already be in the Empire's hands, and it hasn't even been installed in our fighters. Save yours. Gorono didn't like his decisions being questioned, especially by those who were essentially non-military personnel, regardless of their contributions. Normally, his superiors wished that Gorono would restrain himself a little more on the battlefield. Yet here was this seemingly gentle bureaucrat wondering why he spared a life. Dr. Blissix, if you'll take a look at this objectively, you'll see that letting just one pilot escape from the battle does a lot to lend credence to the rebellion. You of all people should know that the Empire were largely viewed as a ragtag group of freedom fighters, unorganized and without any rightful claim or plans for the galaxy. Letting one pilot live that knows he should be dead is effective against morale. I'm sorry your secret is out, but frankly, it may be viewed as an anomaly. The rebellion has several ships with strange capabilities that the Empire doesn't know what to do with. They'll likely dismiss this as... Gorono stopped. A chill running down his spine. Something awful was happening. No, it couldn't be. The world went black, and Gorono simply fell backwards onto the cold stone floor of Deck 5. I'm gonna apologize. I'm getting I don't know what's going on, but we're gonna continue on. I seem to be picking up like some allergies or something like that. We'll see how long I can do this tonight. The Imperial Star Destroyer Razor came out of hyperspace on the far side of Buchanan in the Dantooine system. The TIE RC recon groups Alpha and Beta launched immediately, coordinated perfectly with the exact moment the ship emerged. Once launched from their bays, the Razor jumped back out of the system. It was a relatively standard procedure this far in the Outer Rim. It did not take the reconnaissance group long to realize that precautions were, in this case, not needed. Even a small base would give off some kind of electromagnetic activity. Here, there was nothing. Not from Dantooine, not from any planet in the system. Of course, Captain Brahms did not come all this way not to be sure. The ISD Razor, by the way, ISD is an Imperial Star Destroyer, moved into a high orbit of Dantooine and launched all remaining TIE fighters, each wing taking a defensive posture to support the superior sensors of Scout Group Theta, who wasted no time forming a standard low signal approach to the planet Dantooine. Each of the 4 SCT Scout craft advanced sensors immediately began focusing on the planet, each taking an individual quarter of the planet. They found nothing active. It was quiet. It was a quiet, nerve-wracking experience. Then the silence was broken as Theta 3 pensively reported in. Razor, I am finding an inconsistency on the surface of quadrant 1138. It could be an abandoned city or base, but I'm not getting any reading at all. Captain Bronze, upon receiving the report, somehow knew this was as far as they were going to get here. The informant had either been lying or simply was giving bad information. Sure, he could leave probe droids in the system, but he needed something to report back as soon as possible. Though the Imperial Intelligence Service was pleased to have a captain following leads from one of their plants in the emerging rebellion, Admiral Motti did not share the view, generally, that the Empire's largest vessels be sent to the Outer Rim with 37,000 officers and crew. But for some reason this time, he had agreed, merely saying something about how it would soon not matter, and the rebellion would be surrendering within the week. The sudden change of attitude was almost troublesome, but Brahms had no reason to endanger his career further by not being thorough. He found it somewhat hard to believe that the information was completely false, just possibly out of date. Commander Nita launched 2 transports with Scout Group Epsilon and Tau, escorted by gunship Group Sigma, and have them conduct a search of Quadrant 421's anomalous area and report back findings within the hour. Gorono awoke in a room he did not recognize. Bright, intending to be quiet, but failing. Smell of Bacta. He was in the infirmary, but why? The last thing he remembered, Alderaan. The worst dream he ever had. The feeling as he watched his home ripped apart was the same feeling he had just moments ago. He had to know. As he went to stand, several aides rushed to the bed, insisting he lie back, but Gorono was having nothing of it. He could not even hear what they were saying. He simply removed the sensor leads from his head and arms and began to head for the door. It was there that the doctor blocked the doorway. I don't want to hurt you. Move, Gorono said calmly. Lieutenant, I'm afraid I can't allow that. We simply have no idea why you suddenly passed out like that. I insist you stay here until we can determine why your blackout occurred. Gorono, of course, did not care and felt absolutely fine, except, of course, for the rage he was feeling burning inside of him. He had to know. He had to know everything was okay, that it was just a dream. He grabbed the doctor with both hands by the shirt and lifted him off the ground. He said, "Move." His face began to flush red and the calmness had left his voice. I will explain later, but right now, I have to go. The doctor, terrified, simply quickly nodded his head yes, and Gorono returned him to the ground. Gorono walked out and headed directly for ops. Lieutenant, you should be in the med bay. I'm sorry, sir, but I have to know. I have to know what is wrong. I mean, what is the status of Alderaan? Dodonna looked at him, shocked at what he was hearing, almost along with everyone else. The status of Alderaan? He looked into Gorono's eyes. He had not known this pilot long. He'd never seen a look like this before. This was not some psychosis. This was not simply a bad dream. Something was wrong. Comms. Raise Commander Ihio on Alderaan. After a few minutes by, and with each passing moment, more people stopped looking at Gorono and turned their gaze instead to the communications officer, who, without any words, was frantically pressing keys and turning knobs. When his commander came over to inquire as to the problem, Gorono could not hear the response, but he knew what it was. The officer was unable to communicate with anyone on Alderaan. Rebellion, government, commercial, nothing. The operations supervisor suggested they try testing the equipment by raising another nearby planet. The response from the other planet was chilling. Base 1, we have had radio silence from Alderaan for the past 8 hours. There were reports of an Imperial presence in the area. It could be a blockade of some kind. Gorono looked at Dodonna, while everyone else simply stared at Gorono with the same thought. How did he know? Dodonna simply looked at the ground for a moment, slowly raised his head to look back at Gorono. While he looked into Gorono's eyes, assessing if the pilot was really prepared for it, he spoke to the commander of the watch. Commander, instruct the hangar to prep the craft in Bay A-15 for launch. And quietly to Gorono, well, kid, looks like you'll be testing sooner than you thought. Come with me. Ooh, I need a quick break. But it's time for a treat. Did this last year and it didn't turn out so well. But you got to see my shirt because this is like the epic May the 4th shirt right here. The best. All right, let's get going here. Yes, indeed. An older officer walked into the conference room where Tarkin sat, and Vader stood. Our scout ships have reached Dantooine. That was fast, Tarkin thought to himself, wondering how that were possible. They have found the remains of a rebel base, Tarkin began to smile, but immediately stopped. But they estimate that it has been deserted for some time. They are now conducting an extensive search of the surrounding systems. Tarkin stood up. She lied. She lied to us. This woman lied to us while faced with the annihilation of her own planet. She could not be broken, nor would she be allowed to live. Vader was, of course, saying something about her not betraying this upstart rebellion. It was of no concern. Terminate her, immediately. Vader, however, did not agree. Tarkin was being a fool. Organa's death would only make her a martyr, sending further rally cry to the worlds who had not yet joined the rebellion. He was about to protest when the comm sounded. Tarkin, still red-faced, activated the circuit. Yes? We've captured a freighter entering the remains of the Alderaan system. Its markings match those of a ship that blasted its way out of Mos Eisley. Vader interjected. They must be trying to... That's not very good, Vader. They must be trying to return the stolen plans to the princess. This was his moment to vocalize his thought. She may yet be of some use to us. Vader did not wait for a response, but immediately turned to leave, his dark cape flowing in the turbulence created by its massive frame. Something else was at work here. Something about this freighter perked his interest. He would go down to find out personally. Dodonna, Blissex, and Gorono met in the briefing room. A map of the Alderaan system was displayed, and Dodonna was entering commands into the computer as he spoke. Formation of your wing will need to wait. The goal of this mission is simple. Reconnaissance. You and your wingman will fly to the outskirts of the Alderaan system. You will leave your wingman at the outskirts and fly to Alderaan, find out what is wrong. If there's an Imperial presence, get what data you can, but do not engage them. Keep in contact with your wingman. It's imperative that if one of you make it back with information about what is going on there. I'll go ahead and say it. If this is the new battle station, we didn't need to know as much as possible about it until we have retrieved those plans. You'll be flying a prototype craft. Your wingman in an X-wing. As you know, most of our craft are currently supporting the Liberty and are not due back here for another week. Your craft is already equipped with a unique sensor package that is designed to be used with the same sensor jammer that you had this pleasure of working with. However, try not to use the jammer if it can be avoided. We don't want to give any indications of our presence. If you are engaged, do your best not to be identified by using the sensor jammer and as much speed as possible. Select someone you can trust for this mission. The last thing we need is panic or rumors among our troops. Someone I trust? Right now, that seems a little impossible. Obviously, Dodonna continued, if there is some level of risk here, not only because of the unknowns, but because your craft is as of yet untested. As I mentioned, it looks like you'll be testing it out sooner than we'd hoped. So, it was his project craft. Gorono's mind had drifted away from the project or his need to form a new strike squadron. His mind was solely on his home, and he had cared about little else. He nodded in approval of the plan and keyed the comm. Second Lieutenant Guhar, report to the briefing room on the double. Butch arrived soon after, part of the dinner he had been eating still clinging to the side of his mouth. Gorono motioned, and Butch removed the offending bit before saluting General Dodonna. Sworn to silence, Butch was shown the plan. He said nothing save for, when do we leave? Dodonna said nothing, but keyed the comm. Flight command, clear the hangar of all non-essential personnel and prepare the launch for package Alpha. The hangar craft's elevator had brought Gorono's craft into its launch position and was being fueled and programmed. Gorono simply smiled as he saw the hastily stenciled designation on the wing, A5. Just as Gorono had suspected, the R-22 Spearhead looked decidedly out of place among the outer craft. almost completely black, with markings in a very dark gray. One had to look closely to learn anything about it. Gorono did, however, immediately notice one thing he did not like. There were no cannons. You have to be kidding me. Butch looked worried as he began free flight in his familiar X-Wing. After watching Gorono disappear into the blacked out small craft, he keyed the comm. Lieutenant, is that thing even going to fly? His sense of humor was actually one of the things that Gorono quietly liked about Butch. I'm sure it'll be fine, Holland. The use of Butch's first name let him know that Gorono was in no mood for games today. He completed his final checks and took a deep breath. Gray 2, go for launch. On board the A5, Gorono felt oddly at home in the smaller cockpit. Blissix had prepped him on the use of several controls and advised him against using the experimental concussion missile launchers. Altana to Blissix. Dr. Blissix replied a few minutes later. Secured. Go ahead. Doctor, I know you're upset with me, but sending me up in a craft with no guns is a little much, don't you think? There was a pause. No guns. Ah, yes. We were concerned about the power plant on the R-22 not being able to handle our proposed solution. However, we have shunted the power to the shield capacitors with a little help from a certain expert I believe you are becoming familiar with. Don Akbar, of course. Blissix continued. I understand your trepidation, but please remember that this is not a combat craft. There's a small switch on the bottom left of your shield control. If you hit it, it will tap the extra shield capacitors, allowing you to dump all power to the engines. I believe the extra boost should let you outrun any TIE pursuit. Do try to make it back alive. I can't wait to hear about how it performs. Gorono, under normal circumstances, would have scrubbed this mission, but he knew the reasons. But more importantly, he had to get to Alderaan to find out if his dream was real. Doctor, I need to tell you something. Gorono couldn't even believe he was saying it, but he felt compelled. When I blacked out, it was because I knew something horrible had happened. Don't ask me how, but I see things. Last night I saw in my mind Alderaan destroyed. I just know it is gone. I will go and I will come back. In the meantime, I think it's best that we focus on getting our other crafts operational. I have a bad feeling about this. We may need to get out of here in a hurry. Blissix didn't know what to say. In the silence, Gorono knew what was coming next. It was inevitable. May the Force be with you. Gorono was, however, shocked by the words that came to his mouth next. With all of us, Doctor. What the hell was that all about? As if some unseen puppeteer has guided his entire interaction with Gorono helpless, without will. He closed the secure channel and keyed the flight command. Gray group, prepared for launch. Gorono felt a slight shudder as he brought the ventral repulsors into station keeping. The craft hovered just feet from the floor with near perfect balance. Gray leader, your go for launch. Roger that. Gray 2, let's punch it. Gorono pushed the throttle forward and was shocked by the immediacy and potency of the response. Before he had time to take a breath, he was out of the hangar and headed skyward. Hey, wait up, Butch said, equally shocked at the speed of this mystery craft. Gorono decided to see just what the craft was capable of before taking into hyperspace. Gray 2, accelerate to full speed and proceed to the jump point. We're going to see what this thing can do. He slowed, allowed Butch to pass, engines glowing orange at full output. After a few seconds, Gorono pushed the throttle all the way forward, the remainder of his gravity in the stratosphere in the Yavin 4 pulling him back into his seat. He very quickly overtook Butch's X-Wing. What the hell? Butch couldn't believe what he was seeing. Gorono pushed the craft to its top velocity and then banked hard around, back towards the planet. The craft responded perfectly, balanced, with a unique engine note that Gorono found he liked. Flying towards Butch, he engaged the sensor jammer and targeted. Butch felt his heart jump in his throat and his screen went black, except for the warning klaxons indicating a craft at a missile lock. Hey, that's not funny. Relax, Butch. Just making sure it all works before we head out. Report? Impressive, Gorono thought as Butch relayed the experience. The jammer and the sensors still allow me to target. The good doctor did well. Let's just hope I don't have to find out if it works. Gorono switched off the sensor jammer and turned back towards the jump point. Excellent. Jump on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark. Hope you guys are enjoying this so far. On the planet Dantooine, it was becoming very apparent to Rebel Commander Farhan Helza that the Empire was more interested in than he thought they would be. They had obviously found the former base, at least he assumed based on the increasing number of energy signatures from around that region. The problem was he couldn't risk an active scan, and definitely could not call for help. The distinctive sound of the twin ion engine was piercing the atmosphere nearby, and it would not be long before the craft would be in range. Odds were good that this was a TIE RC. Its sensors were good, but not good enough to detect the hidden enclave and research facility known to a select few as Shadow Base Dark. There was one risk, however. If the TIE flew within 1,000 meters of the compound, the very effect that caused the base to be hidden among the rocks would force the TIE's sensors to go temporarily offline. An investigation was sure to follow, one that could reveal the base upon visual inspection. The odds were low, of course, but the commander could not help but be nervous. The craft turned. Its projected course would take it within 900 meters of the compound. Beads of sweat formed around the commander's head. There were approximately 200 officers, crew, and researchers here. Approximately 20 of some of the finest special ops recruits he had seen all year. The TIE's range was now 6 kilometers. Shadow Base Dark had no armament, no functional starfighters. In fact, most people in the Alliance, when they heard the name of this installation, assumed it to be the name of the former base. Intentionally so, and a wise precaution by General Willard. It was also wise to bring spec ops to train here, not because of the remote and clandestine nature of the base that most assumed but a clever internal cover for its reason for existence. The continuation of research of the cloning, cloaking, and field manipulation work of its previous inhabitants now being studied for use of the Alliance. 4 kilometers. Helza was at a loss for what to do. This scenario had been one of the what if that no one seemed to have an answer for. Even if the base went completely cold, no power at all, the craft overhead would still lose sensors and a signal for ground scout team to investigate. 2 kilometers. Even if he had enough transports to get the crew to safety, they wouldn't make it far, and would only prompt for further investigation from the Empire. He would sooner blow up the whole compound, if it were only possible. 1,500 meters. This was it. Soon the world would come crashing down on them. 1,700 meters. Confirm that last reading? 2 clicks, sir. He's turned away. There were some cheers and a lot of sighs of relief, but everyone stayed alert. This close call may not be the last. Gorono emerged from hyperspace to familiar stars, but nothing about this felt like being home. He hoped with all he had that when he hit the sublight engines and went further in, that he would find nothing about his dream was accurate. Secure channel check. Read you, Grey Leader. I don't like this. I'm not getting any readings. I'm getting some chatter. For a moment, it looked like a TIE interlink, but stopped suddenly. Stay here as planned. Begin a timer and check in for me every 5 minutes. Confirm sensor system interlock. Recorder on. If you stop getting the signal or don't hear back from me, jump. If you see the Imperial activity, report it. But if anyone sees you, anyone, just jump. It's imperative that you be able to report back even if I can't. Butch didn't like it, but understood and confirmed, Grey Leader. Gorono made a familiar heading. Home. And punched the throttle full forward. In a few moments, it was clear that this was more than just a communications block. There was a debris field. To the uninitiated, it would appear as part of an asteroid field. In a few hundred years, it would probably be just that. Bits of planet were colliding with each other, exploding violently as they all attempted to gain equilibrium orbit around the sun. A sickly yet somehow comforting feeling came over Gorono. Almost relief that he wasn't crazy. But then the emotion of this reality hit him. This used to be his home, his family. Everyone he had loved was now gone. How in the galaxy did this His mind paused as alarms sounded in the cockpit. Contacts. Lots of contacts, lighting up his tactical display in bright green. TIE fighters. They were firing, pursuing a freighter, an old Corellian ship from the looks of it at this distance. Gray 2. Imperial contacts at 30 clicks, closing on the drop point position. Looks like they are chasing a freighter and... Gorono's mouth dropped open. There was something else in the system. Spherical. Size of a moon. And it was moving. Moving towards him. But that was impossible. There was no planet that... Then he remembered the briefing. Butch. Confirm sensor data interlink. There's a battle station here. Huge. I want to get as much data as I can back to command. I am receiving, Gray Leader. What is this with the asteroid field? Gorono winced. Somehow he not realized that Butch could see his same readings. Well, it was Alderaan. Butch forgot himself. How is that even possible? I don't know, Gray 2, but I intend to find out. It's a sure bet that the Empire is behind it. If those ties get within your sensor range, I want you to jump out immediately. Confirm, Gray Leader. Then Butch remembered. Gorono was from Alderaan. And I'm sorry. There'll be time for that later. Right now, just focus on by the Force. This thing is enormous, and they're launching more TIE fighters. There's just too much risk. I'm going to head for that freighter and see if they need our help. There were 2 remaining ties buzzing around what appeared to be a YT-1300 transport. Something odd about this one. He'd never seen one move this fast before, unless... Surely not, he thought. One signal remained. Either one of their gunners was very skilled or very lucky. Gorono was closing in, but didn't think he'd yet been detected. Gorono's now close enough to see the crisscrossing green and red blaster bolts going in the opposite directions. Then the explosion he'd seen dozens of times. The last tie was gone. For some reason, the last explosion always seemed larger than the last previous ones. The other ties were out of range. Too slow to make up the gap. Time to make contact. An identified freighter. This is the Alliance Recon Gray Flight. Please identify yourself and your cargo. There was a pause. Then Gorono's heart leapt in his chest as a familiar voice came across the back. Gray Flight, this is Senator Leia Organa. I have vital information for General Dodonna regarding what has happened here. Gorono couldn't believe it. What were the odds of them escaping? He immediately wondered if he could trust that the ship was not bugged. After all, that battle station was probably had hundreds of TIE fighters flying patrols regularly. There was just no way this one ship could have fought them all off. Gorono decided to err on the side of caution. Roger that. Follow me to the jump point Alpha and set course for Taurus. Negative, Gray Flight. We must get the information to Yavin 4 immediately. Gorono didn't care who he was talking to. She had just given the position of the rebel base over an open comm line with the largest Imperial menace in history just 50 clicks away. All due respect, Senator, but your information is out of date. Please follow me. Once we have confirmed a secure channel in an unmonitored system, we'll discuss the next jump point. So many emotions were coming to the surface. Alderaan destroyed, and the only one he could talk to about it was at the moment last on his list. This wasn't the first time they had interacted. Gorono nonetheless assumed correctly that she did not remember. But he did. He would always remember what her and her family had done, and would probably never be able to forgive it. The tone of her returning voice seemed to reinforce his loathing towards her. Listen, Flyboy, we don't have time. Go to Taurus if you like, but we are going to Yavin 4. Leia obviously didn't recognize Gorono's voice, which he had expected. Probably for better at the moment. She may be good at diplomacy across a fancy dinner table, but surely anyone could see what she was doing. She had just handed the Rebel Alliance to the Imperials. Then it came together. Information. The plans. Odds were good, but the Empire already knew exactly where the base was. The timing couldn't be worse. Gorono changed to the secure channel. Gray 2, jump immediately and prep command for imminent attack from Imperial forces. Get what data we have to General Dodonna directly, but do not discuss this with anyone else. Affirmative, Gray Leader. The words had barely come across the comm before Butch was gone. Unbelievable. The thought then occurred to him that Leia may very well be the only Alderaanian that he would ever talk to again. He didn't like the tone of their conversation, but The pain of loss was aching at him. He had to know. He calmed himself. He spoke calmly into the calm. Leia, it's Gorono. What happened to our home? Silence. Then, with a slight tremble, her voice returned. Destroyed. Destroyed by that Imperial battle station. Destroyed by Tarkin and Lord Vader. Darth Vader. Gorono's calm evaporated. Tarkin. Filthy son of a bitch. He would pay for this. Gorono's world began to fade into a red rage. He gripped the throttle so tightly he almost ripped it out of its track. The jump point was approaching. He needed to calm himself down. He took 10 deep breaths. Understood. I'll see you after the jump. I hope you have what I think you have. There was silence for a few moments. Altana? The voice was male. Very familiar. About 2 or 3 years ago. Solo. Han Solo. How in the galaxy was Leia on his ship? What the hell was going on? The jump indicator lit. Yeah, that's right. I'll see you soon, Solo. Talking to the time about what you still owe me. The response was unmistakable, threatening growl of a Wookiee. So, he still had the old guard dog. Whatever. Solo couldn't dodge him forever, but right now, there were more important things about which to worry. Gorono hit the hyperspace motivator, and the starfield blurred around them. Are they away? Tarkin asked Vader as he walked in. They have just made the jump into hyperspace. You're sure that the homing beacon is aboard this? Gosh, bad impressions. I should just have the audio recorded or something like that. You sure the homing beacon was secure aboard their ship? I'm taking an awful risk here, Vader. This had better work. No more risk than continuing to take that tone with me, Vader allowed to come into his mind. To have triumphed over his old master should be giving him a great sense of satisfaction, but the Dark Lord of the Sith was distracted. Hardly the challenge he was expecting. And to have Obi-Wan simply disappear like that was unsettling. He half expected to be pounced on by the old man as he rounded a corner, yet he knew Obi-Wan was gone. The circle was complete, or at least it should feel that way. A dark tension rose in Vader as he removed himself from Tarkin. Something about this whole experience was causing a conflict within him. Surely he could not let his master sense it. Isolation was the answer. Time would reveal the will of the dark side. Captain, Scout Team Tau has reported back. They have found evidence of more than just a simple rebel base presence in the area, but it looks like the base has been abandoned for approximately a year. Brahms nodded at Lieutenant Commander Loth Nita's report. Nita was an information junkie, so it was likely that this was meant to imply that he had more information to either share or save for later. Brahms, however, did not care. He was looking for an active rebel base. The rebel base. The delay and misdirection was infuriating. Is there any indication of where they might have gone? The last inflection was meant to convey his dissatisfaction and unwillingness to play any games about this. For all of Nita's prideful faults, his one uncanny skill was in his ability to find those that thought they could not be found. But it was his informant aboard the Liberator that had led them on this chase across the quadrant. He had put a little too much faith in the commander's reputation. Jumped in too soon. Nita, of course, was silent. Obviously, the evidence of cloning technology present in the abandoned base would have to wait. You have 5 hours, Commander. Find me rebels or find yourself a new ship. Nita did not respond verbally, but nodded, turned, and left the command deck, face red with frustrated anger. Pompous, opportunistic prick. He had no idea how in the galaxy Brahms had given this command. An Imperial-class Star Destroyer was not simply another planetary defense ship. It was fully equipped to singularly wage an entire war. Each captain was in command of some of the most fearsome forces the galaxy had ever seen. Most had no idea of the single-mindedness of well over half of the current stormtroopers on board. He wondered if Brahms even knew. But Nita knew all about the clones used in the last war. He had been there. He knew how they walked, how they held themselves, and the ship, like most, were filled with them, or at least a byproduct of them. Of that he was certain. If the reports were correct, there really was evidence of a Jedi cloning facility here. It could hold the key to the secret programming he had uncovered 5 years ago. That was the true key to command. Unquestioned loyalty to him. It was too much to ignore, so he would find another ship, gladly, and someday return it with it to make Brahms eat his words, right after handing his ship over as well. Admiral Nita had a nice ring to it, he thought with a small smile. Back at his office, he pulled duty rosters and a ship manifest. 5 hours. It wasn't enough. This ship carried much for assault, but little for survey, information gathering, or any useful tasks. The plan must be well thought out, and he had no intention of leaving this planet. Not yet. He went to work, fingers flying over the input pad. Gorono hated hyperspace. It was, of course, odd, considering how much time he spent racing between star systems. But the notion that the only thing between him traveling at unthinkable velocity and the rest of the matter in space was a small Duraprast layer was at times very unsettling. But there was something about this particular craft that was more nerve-wracking. So when the hyperspace motivator warning flickered, the pilot's heart rate immediately quickened. He glanced at the timer. 2 minutes remained. There was, of course, little he could do. In the event of a malfunction, his only option was to find a planet that just happened to have air he could breathe and hope the great powers in the galaxy that there was no one hostile waiting for him, given his nearly defenseless ship. 1 minute. The spearhead began to shudder, and warning klaxons began blaring what was obvious. Gorono wasn't going to make it. Suddenly, though hardly without warning, the starfield jolted into place, and Gorono was thrown forward, the air seemingly ripped from his lungs, his vision fading into black. Butch emerged from hyperspace, and the Yavin system immediately began transmitting. Grade 2 to Base 1. Priority landing protocol. I need to speak with General Dodonna directly upon landing. Per Gray Leader. Grade 2, you are cleared for landing in the primary bay. Vector approach 050. Butch landed and was immediately approached Donna, General Van Willard, and Blissix. Where is Lieutenant Haltana? Butch spoke rapidly, ignoring the question. Sir, I have news from Alderaan. The planet has been completely destroyed by the Empire using a massive new battle station. I have censored data. Lieutenant Haltana believes that Leia Organa is heading here with the plans and that an attack is imminent. Dodonna stopped him there as he looked around. We'll debrief shortly in a more private setting. I asked you where Lieutenant Haltana was, nothing more. Sorry, sir. He sent me ahead. I would expect he will be along shortly. Warning klaxon sounded. General Dodonna, please report to command. Dodonna signaled for the three to follow him. As they left the hangar, Butch locked eyes with Wingsinger, who happened to be close by at that moment. He wondered if the kid had heard his outburst. Somehow it was obvious to him. Something in the eyes indicated that the kid had indeed heard him. Stupid. His face flushed, and he furrowed his brow. Wingsinger suddenly turned the other way, walking rapidly towards crew quarters. The four entered the command center, and the officer of the watch addressed Dodonna. Sir, we have an unidentified craft entering the system. It's headed right for us, sir. Signal defensive fighters to their positions. Get me tactical right away. An analyst wearing large headphones spoke up. I have a signal, sir. Hope you guys are enjoying this. 2 scout garrisons, 4 scout craft, an entire contingent of TIE RC craft, 12 TIE fighters, 10 Delta transports, 3 assault gunboats, 10 AT-AT walkers, 20 AT-ST walkers, 2,000 stormtroopers, and the entirety of our scout bikes on board, and the prefab garrison base. Have you completely lost your mind, Commander Nita? Sir, the evidence is clear. The rebels were here in great number, and somewhere on this planet, Some of them are still here. Brahms simply looked at the report and the request, seeing who had been copied. Admiral Ozzel himself. Nita was either a fool or after his job. But Nita had another pad in his hand. He motioned to it. Something more, I take it? Sir, the base will need a commander. I realize it is a little unusual, but I checked the regulations on this matter. Because the base is deployed by a ship in the Navy, it does not have to be commanded by someone in the Army. Besides, this is your chance to get rid of me. Nita did not say, but immediately realized that Brahms understood. This is his ticket off the Imperial Star Destroyer Razor. How long will it take to deploy? Brahms knew the realistic answer, but he had a feeling that he was already prepped. Sir, as you know, I have been drilling our teams for planetary grand assault. I believe we can have materials planetside in 2 hours, be fully set up and operational in under 2 days. This was the perfect chance to get rid of his menace of a first officer. Here's the reason they were here. He would, in fact, block the transmission of the report to Admiral Ozzel. He would, in fact, maroon Nita here and conveniently forget to send anyone to check on him. Brahms sighed and then signed both pads. Very well, Commander. You'd better be right about this, or don't bother leaving the planet. Always with the or else threats. An old-style, supposed leadership that was running out of time in the galaxy. Fear was won in battle, not bestowed by those who stuck it out the longest, like Brahms. I understand, sir. Thank you, sir. He turned to leave and smiled. Brahms is a fool. Nita had him exactly where he wanted him. And he had now had a signed transfer order to depart Brahms' service, falling directly under the command of Admiral Ozzel, along with half of Brahms' command crew. If the timing was correct, Brahms would leave the system not realizing that by the time the first shift had due to be relieved, the second shift commanders would all be on the planet, along with the third. It's not that he wouldn't have crew available. The Star Destroyer had literally thousands of officers, but he wouldn't have Nita's crew. And it was just the passive-aggressive punch in the face that he was hoping to deliver. Brahms couldn't turn around. He couldn't do anything. He had signed the order, after all. Nita's smile widened. He had referred to him as commander. He obviously had only glanced at the pads. Only the information he wanted him to see. The shocking, obvious requests obscuring the orders. The plans would work. It was his time now. In the dark recesses of the Masasi Temple, the control room was buzzing with activity. General, we have a registration on the approaching ship, the communications analyst was saying. It is a YT-1300 transport named the Millennium Falcon. A pause, then excited. General, they say they have Princess Leia on board. Give them permission to land right away, General Willard said, and turned to leave them. I'll meet them there in the flight deck. Gorono regained consciousness and silenced the multiple alarms clamoring for his attention. Well, I guess I shouldn't be surprised. Rushing off at a not even finished prototype craft. He began running through the ship's diagnostics first. He discovered the problem that was relatively simple. A power line had simply come loose. The problem would take less than a minute repair. All Gorono needed to do was find somewhere to set down, and Gorono stared in disbelief at the nav computer, which had exactly enough information for 2 systems, Yavin and Alderaan. Merely a route in between. No information regarding anything nearby, only a heading. With hyperdrive, the journey would nearly take a minute. Without hyperdrive, the journey would be about 4 days. Gorono had enough life support for 2 of those days. He thought for a few moments about the space surrounding Yavin. He did not have a plot that followed the Hydian way, the common course one would have to follow between Alderaan and the Gordian Reach, the area of space containing Yavin. The common reason to follow these trade routes is exactly the kind of reason he now faced. At least the common routes drop between systems at a fairly regular intervals where one he can enlist help. But in the haste of taking a faster, more military-style route, he took a more direct route. He would instead have routed just to the far side, of course avoiding, Mandalorian space, putting him currently around some place called Findar. Gorono knew very little about it, except that there was nothing between there and Yavin, at least nothing on the charts. This was damn near impossible. an aching feeling. He closed his eyes. He needed to think, to focus. There must be some way he could fix this without leaving the ship. His mind followed the path from the cockpit to the ventral aft access plate, to the power shunt, to the hyperdrive motivator. What was around? How could he bring the wire back into place? A picture formed in his mind. It was tight in that compartment. The wire was probably only a few centimeters away from the terminal. If he could just figure out a way to... Suddenly, the system lit up. The board went green, a droning noise with increasing pitch. The hyperdrive motivator spooling up. Gorono opened his eyes just in time to realize that the engagement lever was still pulled, and the coordinates still in the nav computer. He was then jolted back into a seat as the spearhead launched into hyperspace, a starfield blur, before him a thunderous clap. The Imperial Star Destroyer Razor left orbit and jumped out of the system approximately 45 minutes ahead of schedule. Commander Nita smiled. Brahms had also failed to see the significance of the long-range communication equipment requisitioned. But most importantly, he had not noticed the most important line on that second data pad. It was easily the most ambitious thing Lorth Nita had ever done, and by the time Brahms realized it, it would be far too late. Obviously, he would not transmit the orders. He probably already had destroyed the requisition order and would probably make it look as if Nita had stolen the entirety of the equipment. But the line, hidden with the rest of the request sealed from the end of Commander Nita, but the line, hidden with the rest of the requests, sealed the end of Commander Nita. This was Captain Nita's time now. With full endorsement in hand and a base at his command, Nita would have Admiral Ozzel's full attention. There was the matter of actually finding the hidden rebels. Sure, it was possible that they had in fact left, but the gap in the evacuation profile was far too big to be just a clerical error. Someone was still here, and the solidity of his promotion depended on it. In the hangar on Yavin 4, General Van Willard greeted Leia with a hug. "You're safe. When we heard about Alderaan, we feared the worst." "We have no time for sorrows, Commander." Leia had obviously not heard about his recent promotion. "You must use the information on this R2 unit to plan the attack. It's our only hope." Brack Wingsinger looked away from the conversation with these newcomers were having and back to the Mon Calamari technician working on the Y-Wings they were both standing under. "What do you suppose that was all about, Don Akbar?" The Mon Cal took a slurp of air and replied, "I'm sure that I do not know." His large eye watched as the princess walked away. Wingsinger whistled softly. "Wow, you don't see girls like that every day." All right, y'all. We're going to attempt chapter 5. I'm an hour in, and my voice is starting to give out a little bit, so we're going to see what we can do with this. It wasn't long after Captain Nita's team completed the extended range communication equipment setup that he had received the first coded message from his informant in the Rebel Alliance. "So, the rebels have a new base. They have the plans to the Death Star. Interesting." It was time to make a decision. He could keep the information to himself, but that wasn't an option. He could contact Vader, or he could continue his career plan and contact Admiral Ozzel. He decided to do both. Without Brahms to monitor his communications, he could do so freely, at least until his former captain realized what had happened. He began the protocol for reporting to both, and though nervous, still had to smile. About an hour later, the contact was arranged with Ozzel, but Vader could not be reached. No matter. Ozzel's holographic image materialized in Nita's makeshift office. "Admiral, I have urgent news regarding the location of the rebel base." "Proceed, Captain Nita." So, the Admiral was pleased. At least his risk had paid off. "My informant has sent a message from a habitable moon referred to as Yavin 4. He can now definitively say that the rebel base is active and has been established in the primary command post there. They are apparently an old Masasi temple where they engaged in research of a new type of fighter craft." "Continue." Admiral, apparently the majority of their forces are elsewhere. They have only a minimum number of fighters and possibly no strike craft. However, Admiral, they have the plans for the Death Star and likely have already found a weakness. Apparently, the design contains clues that point to a vulnerability, which is why they have gone to so much effort to steal them. I have not been able to inform Lord Vader as of yet to look for this weakness as well, but the time to attack would be now, sir. This threat may be more than we believe it to be. We will see you about that soon enough. Continue your mission there. I will look into this matter shortly. Soon after the transmission ended, and just as Nita was done smiling to himself regarding how well his plan was working, the holopad lit again. This time, however, it was a much more imposing and much less talkative Darth Vader awaiting his report. Nita nervously relayed what he had told Admiral Ozzel. He was interested to note that Vader seemed to have more information, or at least less surprise at the mention of the mysterious Yavin 4. Very well, Commander. Nita noted that Vader did not refer to him as Captain, but felt no need to correct the Darth Lord of the Sith. I will inform the Emperor of this myself. Let us hope for your sake that the information is accurate. Nita swallowed hard. He knew very well what Vader meant. Blame for any failure would not fall to Vader. His special relationship with the Emperor would mean that Nita alone would bear any wrath of the mysterious but powerful ruler. Surely a death at the hands of Vader would be more merciful. Thank you, my lord. The transmission ended abruptly before Nita could say anything further. Yeah. Y'all, I have to apologize. I cannot continue. My throat is starting to actively hurt, and there's some sort of like, yeah, starting to just. I don't want to push it too far, so I'm going to end here, and I will try if there's enough interest in continuing to read the story. I will do that. I believe the download for this is currently offline, but I will try at some point to update that information in the description below, or just say something in the comments and I'll contact you privately, that sort of thing. But yeah, I think that's where I need to stop for the night. I just wanted to give you that little bit of extra cliffhanger, and yeah, I've enjoyed reading this again. I actually have not touched this in a year, so that's why I sound so like, you know, not sure of myself. Turns out reading a book is hard out loud. I did the audiobook for my last book, Just Do This, and it took a long time. It was very time-consuming and almost painful process. And so I do appreciate your attention today. And yeah, we'll see you again in another broadcast. And may the force be with you. Cheers, everybody.